Carbon credits and the architecture of financial control. Introduction. Climate as a cover story. Carbon credits are commonly presented as an environmental tool, a way for markets to participate in climate mitigation by assigning value to reduced or removed emissions. This framing is incomplete and strategically misleading. While climate change provides the moral and political justification, the real significance of carbon credit lies elsewhere. They represent the financialization of environmental externalities and the construction of a new layer of global economic governance. At stake is not merely emission reduction, but who defines value, who verifies reality, who arbitrates dispute, and who captures rents in a rapidly expanding global market. Carbon credits are not a peripheral climate instrument, they are the foundation of a new class asset, embedded within a broader architecture of standards, reporting regimes, and financial products, and legal enforcement mechanisms. In short, carbon credits are not about saving the planet, they're about price reality and controlling infrastructure that through which that pricing occurs. Point number one, externality to asset, the core transformation. In classical economics, carbon emissions are a negative externality, an unpriced cost imposed on society. The intellectual move behind carbon credit is to convert that externalities into a measurable, tradable unit. Once carbon credit equals 1 metric ton of CO2 or equivalent avoided or removed, this is not a moral statement, it is an accounting operation. Once emissions are quantified, standardized, and verified, they become comparable across geographies, transferable across firms, stackable into portfolios, and priced by markets. At that point, carbon ceases to be pollution and becomes inventory. This transition mirrors earlier financial transformations: mortgages into mortgage backed securities, risk into derivatives, sovereign credibility into bond yields. Carbon credits follow the same logic: abstraction, standardization, and monetization. Why voluntary markets are strategically important? The emphasis on voluntary carbon markets is not accidental. Voluntary markets serve as incubators for institutional design. Historically, near every dominant financial regime followed this path. Voluntary adoption, best pricing, best practice signaling, investor experience, mandatory disclosure, regulatory enforcement. Voluntary markets allow experimentation without political backlash. They enable institutions to test standards, normalize reporting frameworks, build data pipelines, establish dominant players. By the time regulation arrives, the market structure is already locked in. Calling carbon markets voluntary is not a promise of freedom, it is a sequencing strategy. Integrity, trust, and the myth of neutral standards. Carbon markets suffer from a fundamental problem: credibility. Without trust, a credit is meaningless. A credit does not represent real additional permanent emissions reductions in is functionally fraudulent. As a result, the market's core bottleneck is not demand but verification. This is where integrity frameworks enter. High integrity standards are often framed as ethical safeguards. In practice, they are gatekeeping mechanisms. Standards determine which projects qualify, which methodologies are acceptable, which geographies are credible, which actors are excluded. Every single every single standard creates winners and losers. Every certificate regime concentrates power in the hands of those who define and enforce it. Integrity is not neutral, it is selective. Trust as infrastructure, not emotion. Markets do not run on trust as a feeling, they run on trust as infrastructure. In carbon markets, trust is produced by multi-layered system, measurement protocols, verification bodies, disclosure requirements, and audit firms. Legally enforceability. Legal enforceability. This system functions as a trust engine, a machine that converts uncertainty into a tradable certainty. Whoever controls this engine controls the market. This is why financial centers compete not on emotions reduction but on standard setting authority. Legal credibility, reporting dominance, dispute resolution. Carbon markets do not reward those who reduce emissions most efficiently. They reward those who own the pipes through which verification and finance flow. London and the logic of financial gravity. The United Kingdom strategy illustrates the this logic clearly. Britain no longer competes primarily on manufacturing scale or industrial output. Its comparative advantage lies in financial services, legal systems, regulatory expertise, international credibility. Carbon markets are structurally aligned with these strengths by positioning London as a hub for carbon trading, a center for standard recognitions, and a venue for arbitration, a leader in disclosure frameworks. The UK is attempting to replicate its historical role in insurance markets, foreign exchange, global finance. This is not climate leadership, it is institutional capture of an emerging market. Nature as capital, land, yield, and monetization. One of the most consequential shifts enabled by carbon and nature markets is the transformation of land into a yield producing financial assets. Forests, wetlands, mangroves, and agricultural land are no longer valued solely for timber, crops, and biodiversity. They are valued for their carbon absorption capacity, which can be quantified, verified, and sold. This turns nature into a balance sheet item. Landowners become asset managers. Conservation becomes a revenue strategy. Ecology becomes financialized. This doesn't mean conservation is fake. It means conservation is now subordinate to return structures, ethics, indigenous language, and risk management. The heavy emphasis on indigenous consent, community consolation, and benefit sharing is often misread as moral awakening. It is better understood as risk mitigation. Without these safeguards, projects face legal challenges, credits lose credibility, investors withdraw, markets collapse, ethical framing functions as insurance against reputational risk, legal liability, regulatory intervention. Morality here is not the driver, stability is. The financial stack where power actually resides. Carbon markets operate as a layered system. Credit, the basic unit, standard, define validity, reporting, enforce transparency, finance, price and trade risk, law, enforce outcomes. Power doesn't reside at the bottom of the stack, it resides at the top. Power generate credits, institutions define standards, markets price them, courts enforce disputes. Those who control the upper layers extract value regardless of who generates the underlying asset. This is the same logic that governs intellectual property, financial derivatives, global trade law. Carbon markets as a prototype for future governance. Carbon credits are not just the endpoint, they are prototype. The same architecture can be applied to biodiversity, water rights, soil health, air quality. Anything measurable can be priced, anything priced can be traced, anything traced can be governed. Carbon markets are a test case for post industrial governance, where control is exercised not through territory or force, but through standards and systems. Conclusion. Price reality. Carbon credits represent a fundamental shift in how power operates in the modern world. They are not about virtue, they are not about guilt, they are not about activism, they are about who gets to define reality in numerical terms. In a system where emissions are priced, measured, verified, and traded, power belongs to those who write the standards, control verification, enforce disclosure, set legal boundaries. Carbon is no longer pollution. It is a financial abstraction, and whoever controls that abstraction controls the flow of capital, credibility, and compliance in the climate era. This is not environmental policy, this is financial statecraft.